This is a Des Moines Historical Society members-only presentation. The history of Bob Elgin and the beginning of the Des Moines Zoo is told by Rob and Jane Elgin. Rob, as you tell the story, what are you most proud of when you think about your father?
Dad's memories, they live on, and they will for many, many years.
When did your dad's love of animals start, and how did this lead him to the zoo?
Dad, in his early years, loved falconry. And even growing up as a kid, he had birds of prey, hawks, some falcons. And that, as much as anything, led into his zoo work. It was a huge foot in the door when it came to applying for the zoo. And he carried that love of falcons further along, and it grew into a love of every animal that we had out there at the zoo.
Rob, you have a great story about your dad and his early days, so why don't you tell us the story as you remember it?
It will begin with the early years, as you mentioned. Dad, Bob Elgin, was born on May 21st, 1921 in Centerville, Iowa. 36 years later, he married Jane Hill, my mother, and together they raised 5 kids. I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm the oldest one. And with the 5 of us running around, this house quickly became a zoo in itself. We grew up in Avon Lake, and plenty of animals even back then, before Dad got started with the zoo. But Dad's special interest, even back then, was falconry. And I remember our backyard, at least half of it being devoted to flight lines and hawks and eagles. And the neighborhood kids understood pretty quickly that you'd better watch where you're playing, or they'd come in for a nasty surprise.
You've told us about the early days of your father, so what was his next step?
Dad became the director of the Des Moines Zoo back in 1966. And when he walked into the zoo, it was nothing like you would see now if you were to visit. A few dozen animals, very small enclosures. Attendance was terrible, and the living conditions for the animals weren't much better. I was too young really to appreciate what Dad was up against, but knowing him and understanding what he was going through back then, I know one of the first thoughts that he would have been considering was, how am I going to change this? How am I going to improve this? Because even back then, before we had the animals that we did later on, his love for animals was first and foremost, top priority.
Your dad had such a great connection with the animals and such dedication to them. It helped him get on the national news and expose the zoo. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Some of the programs that he put together, the Sunday reptile shows in the Adventure Days, huge attractions. I may have mentioned earlier, but in the Adventure Days, there would be a chance to pet a lion cub, pet a wolf, ride a camel, ride the elephant, listen to a snake lecture. And in those Adventure Days, we'd pull in over 5,000 people. Wow, just amazing. A huge crowd. Parking lot would be packed, and a very, very popular event. Something we did summer after summer, Sunday after Sunday. But Dad had some special things he did too. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was the idea of running Pedro, the professor, for president. And it was a pretty good idea. The professor had his own platform that he ran on, and I don't know how many votes he got, but an interesting idea. And news of this went worldwide and really helped put the zoo on the map. The Chicago show that I'm trying to remember the name of, he was on. He went to New York for a couple of them.
Clearly your dad had a special bond with the animals. Now, did the old saying, never show your fear, come into play at all?
I don't know how much of that is true, but I can say this. Dad never showed his fear. There was a time when, we talked about Skipper. When he was first donated to the zoo, didn't have a cage to put him in. The previous owner led Skipper to my dad's station wagon. Skipper climbed into the passenger seat, Dad was driving, and the owner was in the back. Again, you have to understand how big and how potentially dangerous this animal was. It was night, Dad was driving back, and it was a long drive, at least an hour. And the chimp hadn't ridden in a lot of cars, I guess, especially at night. He sees an oncoming car's headlights. He grabs the wheel, and there's nothing my dad could have done. They're heading for the ditch. Dad had the presence of mind to get on the brake so they didn't wreck the car. But that was the first time Dad had ever seen the chimp, and no hesitation. He took the owner's word at face value, and the owner said the chimp will be okay, and things worked out okay then. Odds are when you spend as much time as Dad did with the animals, there's going to be problems, there's going to be incidents. Dad was bitten on significant bites 2 different times. A copperhead bite, copperhead is a pit viper, a fairly poisonous snake, not on the level of a cobra, but Dad spent a day or 2 in the hospital and had his arm worked on. Of course, the most dangerous one was that Indian cobra bite when he was charming the snake, and that's the one that almost killed Dad. Dad had spent quite a bit of time building up an immunity to cobra venom, but because he'd taken a booster shot just a couple of days before, his antibodies were tied up, and when the cobra bit him, there was nothing left to fight the venom. So Dad was immediately admitted into the hospital, into an intensive care, and it wasn't looking good. Dad couldn't have the commercial horse serum because he's allergic to that. So they were able to fly Bill Host, who's the owner of the Miami Serpentarium, up from Miami. Bill came up immediately, gave Dad a blood transfusion, and saved his life. And I remember that moment real well, and I know you remember it even more clearly.
Bob was able to help many people in the same way that Mr. Host did after that by donating his blood to when people were snake bitten.
Yeah,
he was called upon several times to do that.
Yeah.
How many things do you think that your dad changed in the zoo industry as a whole that's become a standard practice they still do today?
Yeah, the zoo became very respected, with all the zoos in the country, and Bob was friends with many of the zoo directors throughout the country, and he started the term affection training, and it was taken up by a gentleman in England and became a fairly universal term. Helping
the animals adjust to the cages was probably his biggest contribution, because that bothered him more than anything. The fact that for years and years the animals, despite Dad's pleas, lived in these tiny cages. Dad didn't like it like that, but there's not much he could do besides the affection training. But that became something, kind of a standard that we adopted, and extremely successful, because an animal that had been trained in this way, where we could take it out and exercise, whether it be a lion or a wolf, and it doesn't matter, did not pace in the cage, was much more adjusted to life in a zoo, and
able to be treated.
That was his biggest contribution that I can think of. When I think about the contributions that he brought to Des Moines, though, I think of the fact that not only in his mind and through his work did he develop a vision of what the zoo could be, but his actions spoke volumes as to what could be done. Time and time again, I think there was the pushback that, no, the city's too small. There isn't enough people living here to support a zoo along the lines of what you're thinking, Bob. But time and time again, he'd draw 5,000 plus people out there on a Sunday, showing them that this city is big enough to support a zoo like this. And eventually that idea caught on.
He put Des Moines on the map with his PR program. The zoo was known nationally and internationally.
Dad's work with the zoo, I mean, important back then, and I think he was a visionary for what the zoo could be, and you've given us a chance to talk about that. We're grateful for that.
Yeah. I doubt very much that the zoo would exist today had it not been for him. Yeah. And the present zoo people feel that way and have acknowledged that.
As your husband was working to improve the zoo, are there any memories that really stand out?
Well, when I saw what long hours my husband was working, I rarely saw him because he was spending and had to spend so much time at the zoo. And then when he wasn't at the zoo, he was reading about the habits of all of the animals that he would care for, or speaking to other zoo directors for advice. And I kind of lost my husband for a while, but then I regained him again after he had been at the zoo for a while, and he was always very kind and very and letting me be with the animals as well, sit with the animals and learn. And then the little lion cubs came home, and so I was able to take care of them. One of the first times that I felt like I might have had a special part in the zoo, and was recognized as a valuable zoo person. I got a call from a zoo. The little, it was the little, one of the little cats, one of the, I don't remember.
Little ocelot, or?
It may have been.
Yeah.
Apparently was constipated. So, Jane, please come down, and we need some help, and bring a suppository with you. So I came down to the zoo, gave the little animal the suppository, and he was healed. That was my contribution to the Des Moines Zoo.
Oftentimes, the snakes would come home with us, and oftentimes they'd escape. I remember you telling a story once, going down to the kitchen one morning, and here's a snake cage sitting on the counter, the kitchen counter, and in it was an Asiatic cobra banging on the glass, trying to
Hooded.
Hooded, and trying to get out. Mm-hmm. And it's memories like that for better or worse, they stick with you.
You're working with wild animals, and unfortunately not everything goes according to plan. So have you had issues?
Yeah, from time to time, it kind of opens up the door for the animals that might have gotten loose. And it's inevitable. One of the memories we have most is when Dad would take the Bengal tiger out and patrol the zoo at night. Because occasionally we'd have vandals that break into the zoo, and they'd either injure the animals, vandalize the buildings, or sometimes they'd let the animals out. And there was a time, and I can't remember the date, but they broke into the cage of a black panther we had. And the animal was loose, running around on the golf course. And luckily this was an animal that Dad had spent quite a bit of time with when the animal was a cub. So there wasn't any problem getting him back, but there were some adventures there that you held your breath, not sure how they're going to work out, I guess.
So with all the wild animals you were around on a day-to-day basis, were there any of them that had you concerned where maybe you weren't always safe?
Skipper, the chimp. Skipper was a private donation and came to the zoo in the late 70s. One of the only animals that myself and all the other zookeepers were truly afraid of. Extremely intelligent, a huge animal, aggressive, intimidating, and dangerous. And took the 2 fingers off my dad's left hand 2 years after we got him. But he's one of those memories that I'm sure will stick with all of us for better or for worse.
One of the few worst.
Obviously, the chimp was a concern. Are there any other memories of specific times that you can think of that you were scared around the animals?
Yeah, there was. We had a keeper that was in there in the tiger cage, and his tiger was a big male, Brucey the tiger. Mm-hmm. And tigers are another one of those animals that as they get bigger, they get kind of mean-tempered and very territorial. The tiger, the zookeeper thought he'd closed the door and latched it as he was going out. He didn't. Tiger was loose and walking around that part of the zoo. And I'll always remember Dad, you could tell that we were all scared to death because this thing was 400 plus pounds. This was a big animal and potentially could be a real problem. But Dad, in his way, was able to identify himself to the animal, made a kind of a tiger noise, and the tiger looked at him. There's a couple snarls because the tiger was afraid too. But then the tiger walked up to Dad, rubbed up against him, and Dad was able to get a leash on him and take him back into the cage. But we were holding our breath. That was a especially scary moment.
Jane, the focus of this has been on your husband, Bob, but clearly there had to be some issues for you too. Weren't you worried about your kids being around all of these animals?
At the beginning, that wasn't such a problem, but I did worry about Bob because he was training snakes and doing the snake charming early on, and naturally I worried about that a little bit, but I trusted that he knew what he was doing, and well, 99% of the time he did, so it worked out.
So did each family member find their own species to gravitate to? For example, I know that you had one sister that was very connected with wolves. How about the rest of the family members?
Mom had mentioned the lions. We'd bonded with those probably more than any other animals, and we had litter after litter of wolves that they grew up in the bathtub as well.
The youngest one was a bit too young. However, when we had the baby lions at home, I can recall him lying down on the floor and watching cartoons, and the little baby lions lying on top of him and licking his face. He says he still remembers and dreams of that.
Our other sister Becky fell in love with the wolves and still does. She lives in Oregon now and is very involved with wolf conservation efforts out there.
Oh, excellent.
And writes quite a bit, does an excellent job of blogging what's going on out there with the hunting of wolves, and she's very active with that. More active now with animals than the rest of my brothers and sisters and myself.
She worked with the wolves in Alaska at the zoo for a short time,
That's
and then
true.
when she returned, she has been an advocate for the wolves for many years, and will continue to be.
So, Rob, for you personally, did you find that leaving the zoo kind of left you empty? Because there's a certain thrill or excitement missing from your life after all this time working and dealing with animals?
Yeah.
There is that thrill of the unexpected. Yeah, I miss that so much because there's never been a job since the zoo job and working with Dad that has come close to the memories that I was able to pick up from those days.
And what a
Nothing will ever
marvelous
come close.
opportunity
Yeah.
for you young people to be able to work with your father. That's rare.
Yeah.
You know, life's pretty dull now. I just have 4 little house cats, and they just don't compare to the lions, unfortunately. Bob would be
Humdrum
most
lives
unhappy if he knew I had just little domestic house cats. I miss the lions very much. I miss them. I miss the little ones, and I miss Leonardo. Leonardo was my lion because I helped raise him when Bob was injured, and he was just a cub in our home, and so he bonded to me. And then I stayed in the cage with him when he was growing up. Then I didn't see him for quite some time, but I went back in the cage. You must understand this was all under very controlled conditions, you know. And he was glad to see me and gave me kisses, and we remained buddies.
Complete trust that the animals, especially the
yes.
lions and some of the big
yes.
cats, would have in you.
Yes.
Time and time again, I'd take Maria the lion out for a walk, and there was a few times that I think, well, let's go for a drive. And I'd open up the driver's passenger side of the car, and she'd look at the car, and she'd look at me. I'd
thanks.
pet her, and it'd say, it's okay. And she'd jump into the car. When you raise some of these animals, and the emphasis on some of them as cubs, the bond there is something that you can never put into words. It's pretty unique and a very
wonderful.
powerful bond.
It is. It really
And,
is.
yeah,
It's
the
real
moments that
love.
stick with you
It's
most.
real love.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Is there a story that your kids love to hear over and over?
The lions in the bathtub. No question about it. You can tell them as they get so absorbed when you're telling this story. You can tell them that over and over again, and it's almost like they're there. They enjoy it so much. Dad left so many wonderful memories with so many people that maybe that was his most unique talent.
That's true. That's true.
The idea that he could take an experience like the zoo and make it into something that so many others could share and enjoy. And as I mentioned when I talked about Dad before he retired, it was an era that we won't see again. We'll not see a time or an opportunity, an experience like this come around in our lifetime ever again. It was a special man in a special place at a special time, and everything aligned just right.
Rob, on a personal note, how do you think your dad influenced you?
You put your heart into your job, I think, and that's a very big one. The idea that if you commit to something, you need to follow through. The importance of doing your best. And I'm only scratching the surface. Dad was a role model like no other. He could be a tough son of a gun, believe me. He'd push you and push you. And there were times when you just throw your hands up and think, no more, enough. But you walked away from those experiences a much better person. And I didn't always see that then, but I see it now. in so many ways.
This is a Des Moines Historical Society extra. It's a fond memory from legendary Des Moines radio personality Steve Gibbons.
We started off the show with Bill Riley, Bob Elgin, and it's called Zoo Parade. And today, Bill, we're going to be talking about the panther, or whatever big cat it was. And so they brought this cat in the studio, and all these bright lights kind of hit him. And if you know anything about cats, they're not real keen on a lot of strange people and noises. And so they brought the cat in, and you could tell just by the way he was constantly looking around, he was like, where's the exit? Where's the exit? And then something happened, and I don't know what it was. Somebody made a noise or something happened, and the cat went right up that studio wall. The studio walls were like burlap that had soundproofing behind them, but it was if you had claws, there's no problem to go up that sucker. And the cat just took off into the grid up above. Then he'd walk the grid, and everybody else is on. We had to get ladders. We were on ladders, and you had one guy pushing you on the bottom, and you're hanging on at the top with trying to get this cat down. Bob Elgin, and it was just calm as a sunny day. He just, come on, come on. He had this long stick that had a grabber or something. He was reaching up into these 1,000-watt bulbs that hang down from this grid, and he's up there banging around. I was afraid he was going to pop one of them, and the lights fly all over the place, broken glass. But he did get that cat down.